This is Graham.
And this is Jackie.
And we're about to have a fermented affair.
Well, hey, Graham. Good afternoon. How are you doing?
Good. How are you, Jackie?
I am doing fine, thank you. And I hear that you have lined up, and I'm talking of the music. The music's going on forever. I don't remember it going on forever. Sorry. And so I'll just keep talking. And you know me. And so there we go. But I hear that you have a fantastic, you call the Mushroom King, on the show today. And, that's not my forte, so I will probably be asking a lot of nice questions throughout this. But I'm going to let you guys just take it over, and then I'll just interject when I have absolutely no idea what you're talking about.
Perfect. Well, yep, I got Tom Wiepert here with us. He's known as the Mushroom King out in the Midwest. And how are you doing today, Tom?
Good, Graham. How are you?
I'm doing good.
I'm excited.
Can you give a little background about yourself? Because I'm sure everyone wants to know about the Mushroom King and who he is, but just tell us a little bit about what you do out there in Missouri.
Well, basically, around here, morel hunting it's something you learn. I learned before I could probably tie my own shoes. I was out mushroom hunting. I mean, that's a big springtime event here. So basically, I turned it into a love, from hunting mushrooms. I kind of started in the culinary arts field younger in life and worked with a lot of mushrooms and found that going out and picking them and, selling them to restaurants or to individuals, patrons, was a good way to supplement my income, but also kind of an exciting thing. And I got into trying to find them earlier and earlier and then started recording them and actually studying how they moved or where I might find them or tree types or, different patterns. I've actually picked in 28 states as of now, from Texas to California. I'd like to get down in the southern states, South Carolina and, Georgia and Tennessee, but haven't had a chance to do that yet.
Right. So I'm sure if people are wondering, and I'm sure some people are, what is a morel? And what is a morel mushroom, if people want to consider it a mushroom?
Right. Cool. I mean, a morel, and, the funny thing is, as I travel around, I do certain shows, it's like they're not always called a morel. I mean, some people call them lambfish or sponge mushrooms, I mean, they have all these weird names that they associate with them, and basically the morel is just kind of like the fruit of an apple tree of an organism that lives underground on actual trees and kind of a symbiotic relationship until, I find around here it's symbiotic to the point where it helps trees out, and then if there's death, like by an elm tree or a cottonwood, there's a massive fruiting where that actual mushroom's like, hey, I need to make these morels, which are these really tasty mushrooms that people fry up, and I need to fruit them everywhere, and try to increase my root system and get out of town, So they're pretty interesting.
Right, and so these are a kind of mushroom that it has to be found in the wild because they're not something that's grown or cultivated commercially, correct?
Well, I see where there are certain, actually there is a company that's cultivated. I think it's, it's a hard process to recreate something that's actually, a symbiotic relationship between the tree and, the organism. To me, they do sell kits, and I think they are growing them. I just don't think it's that successful. To me, you couldn't improve on Mother Nature, and that's what I've learned is you have to kind of adapt to the mushroom itself, because it's going to be in different places every year. It doesn't always show up the same place, so you kind of have to study its patterns and moisture. I mean, there's a lot to it to be successful at it.
Right, and they're starting to find now. I mean, there are two main or three main types that these people basically consider morels. They have the blondes, the blacks, and then what people call gray morels. But we're finding now that there's a lot more different types of them than we thought. Is that
right?
Correct?
I mean, I hear, there's tons we talk in different forums, which there's tons of, websites and things devoted to just mushrooms in general. And, there's consensus like 142 types might even be the actual number of morels. I mean, because I notice that they're like the trees or their host. If they're on an elm tree here, they seem to be different than the mushrooms that grow on a cottonwood. When a cottonwood dies or they get in a blowover or a tornado, they have a massive fruiting, like 20, 30 mushrooms in a huge cluster, to where an elm tree you might get 2 or 3 of that, but the ridges are different on them, and then like an ash tree, I've noticed those mushrooms are a little heavier than an elm morel. There's difference in thicknesses of walls, and, really that you say that is kind of, it's very interesting, because I noticed in the fire burns, where morels come up in plenty after, a forest fire, but some of the mushrooms look like the certain fir trees' pine cones, kind of like they're hiding themselves, but they've, seem to have that hue. Some might even be a red, and some might even be a more black. I mean, it's just an incredible thing, There's more than one species, or 3 species, I'm sure.
Right, and I got to I was lucky enough to sit into Michael Kuo's discussion at Colorado Mycological Society one time, and he's a gentleman who's doing the PCR DNA studies, where they're looking at how they're related and how many species there are, and it's really interesting to see that even though they visually or morphologically look very similar to each other, if not almost identical, that they're actually different species of mushroom. And that just goes to prove what people that have been hunting them for a really long time, as you have, what people have been seeing is actually true, and that there are more types of morel than people at first suspected.
Right, and in the 43 years, basically I started when I was 2, 3 years old. The last 15, that's when I really started noticing things like that. Hey, some of these are this way. And even I've gotten to the point where you get in, and it's a common. And I don't say it's a misconception. I've never seen a deer or a turkey. I've seen a box turtle eating a morel. But they say, oh, they ate the tops off of them. Well, I've been in areas and videotaped where there's 100 morels without a top on it, or 100 morels that all have the same identical basic hole in the stem, where it kind of grew not so much together, but there was a common thread, like that whole mycelium mat there had when they did their mitosis making that mushroom. They all had that genetic flaw, and they were all the same. Not the same, but they all had no top. So I just think that they're so incredibly awesome that they're not the same. And, it's kind of an interesting thing how they progress with a tree, or a bush.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the interesting thing, is that their hosts basically kind of determine where you want to find them. And so you mentioned burns as one of them. One of the places that you find them is a place where a forest fire burned. And could you kind of just give a little more background on why they think that is?
Oh, I think, and from what I've read and from what I can understand of the actual morel organism, with its mycelium being roots that eat material and are helping that tree or bush get phosphorus and some other minerals in exchange for their sugars, when that fire comes through, multiple things have happened. Those trees have been killed. Some of them are definitely going to die. So that host dies. So that also triggers the morel into saying, uh-oh, my host is gone. I need to massively fruit. And also, you might consider, you just burnt the top layer of that morel. And that morel, if you were to cut it off, I've noticed in areas here where there's bulldozer tracks or tank tracks or where there's any disturbance, morels grow in there because you've cut off its mycelium. So it's going to fruit for 2 reasons: to try to repair the organism itself, and also because its trees are gone. And then it's waiting for that next, round of trees that are going to grow. After a forest fire, there's always going to be some new growth, and they're just waiting there to be first guy on the block too. So it's survival of the fittest is why they grow in the forest fire.
Yep, absolutely. And I also wanted to ask you a little bit more about habitat just in general. Like, what's the kind of habitat that morels grow in?
Well, see, it varies by state or where you're at. In the Midwest, we're kind of blessed, you know. I mean, not to brag or anything, because I've been in certain areas when you're in a certain place at the right time, you know, and that's kind of how I look at it. Morels are all about you have to be there at the right time, and you have to study what's going on. You know, I can look at certain bushes and trees and say, hey, there's been moisture here, and these are bloomed. Look how, you know, vibrant the colors are in these bushes or plants, you know, like, and then you're like, oh, so there should be morels and they should be plentiful. Or you can pull up and look at them and say, oh, no, you know, there's not been enough rain or I'm too early here. But it's being host-driven, and then again, it's kind of like the fireburn thing occasionally happens here. You find a cottonwood, you know, in whatever area you're looking, let's say there's different habitats. We have, you know, wetlands. We have our rivers, you know, which are bottoms, and there are a lot of the trees would be cottonwoods. And I consider there to be major cottonwoods, which are huge trees, and then they have, you know, if you have a storm or they blow over, every year one dies. That's where you'll get a pretty good massy fruiting. And then I call them secondaries, where they've either they're regrowing in from floods or the conservation agents have planted them or people, and there's lots of them. Well, they're kind of a weak tree and they die, you know, like 5% a year of them until there's just the big ones left. So those are always good areas when you're in the wetlands. And also, you know, willow trees, sometimes sugar maples, which I heard you telling the story to somebody the other day, how you were like, oh, wow, we went into some sugar maples and there were morels everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the amazing thing is that morels are just so
that is common, but it's just like every 5, 6, 7 years that happens in certain areas, and that's stressing, you know, that's some kind of stress that happened to those trees the morel's picking up on, and it's trying to compensate by increasing its roots, you know. And so also in the river bottoms we would like, you know, there's willows, cottonwoods, there's sycamores. Sometimes you'll find some elm. The problem, you know, around here anymore is like mulberry trees. They grow in and they kind of shade the sunlight because sunlight's definitely needed for morels. I mean, it's kind of like the magic chemistry. So if we were up in the hills, you know, it's ash trees, it's elms, it's still cottonwoods because in every creek cottonwoods grow. There's still sycamores. There's cedar trees. So you really have a wide variety of trees here that they like. But you have to have moisture, you know, and we have to have humidity, and ground temperature has to be in that magic, you know, 53 or, you know, not much hotter, you know, because that's been our problem here the last few years is we get a good morel, we get some good rain, the ground is warm, the morels come, and then all of a sudden we get a really, really, really hot spell, and the ground cooks, and the morels know they can't germinate anymore, so they don't fruit anymore. So they kind of go to sleep until next year.
Yep. So, that's one of those things that's really interesting is they only want to really appear for that one window in the year.
And that's you know, and like you, you know, I was in the show in Colorado Springs and you came down and had that stinkhorn. I every year have somebody say, oh no, morels grow in November. You know, somebody blah 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 found them in their garden, and I'm like, no, it was probably a stinkhorn. You know, and it looks a little bit like it, but you've never seen a morel with a veil. I mean, morels are very easily identifiable. That's another reason why people go out and hunt them. It's not, you know, there's no real poisonous look-alike, and it's pretty easy to, you know, to inspect a morel. I mean, and then say that's a morel if you've done it. As with any.
Yeah, I mean, the look-alikes that are poisonous don't really look anything like it, if you know anything about mushrooms. And
right, and I kind of do, you know, try to help the novice person that doesn't, you know, that may have never ever seen, you know, they've only seen one picture and they're like, oh, I'm not really sure. And once you take them out and cut a few of them open, and you know, it's like, oh, this is easy, you know. And
yeah.
Cooking them is the fun part.
So you're certified through the state of Missouri to identify morels, correct?
Right. I'm in Missouri, and I don't know, as you know, every state, but most states have a food code. Actually, I'm certified in Missouri and Iowa. Iowa, they offer also offer a course because they don't. The reason for certification is if you were selling mushrooms to an individual or a restaurant and, lo and behold, some bad blood happened, he bought other mushrooms from somebody else, or the money wasn't right, and you took him, say, one of those other mushrooms that aren't considered morels, and maybe you cut a few verpas up or, something, and you put them in those mushrooms and somebody got sick, then there's some liability, And in Missouri, it's even stricter because in the past 30 years, they have only issued three inspection permits that I know of. And basically all it says is that I'm a wild mushroom identification expert for morels and in a food establishment or, individual that I am approved to sell to them within the state. And they could resell that product, which has been, it took me 7 years to get that. I kind of hold that as a big deal. I mean, it took a long time to satisfy them, and it seems weird that you have that, but, in this day and age, you really want to make sure that the guy that's out there picking your mushrooms or harvesting your wild edibles knows what he's doing. Not that, there's a ton of people that are going to get sick from an unedible morel, but you just don't want that, and you want them picked proper too. There's other things that they don't even cover that I hold dear, and you probably hold dear too as a chef. We don't like them soaked. I like you cut the mushroom. You make sure you handle it very well, so it's because it is a food product. And you don't want to get anyone sick, and so that's kind of the other thing that kind of, led them to let me have the certification, that we prove that we also know from a food aspect that, mushrooms shouldn't be in plastic like that. There's a lot that goes along with it. So
there is, because it's one of those things that the proper harvesting and storing of them is a big deal as well, like you're saying, because you can have problems with things going and spoiling on you if you're not careful, especially when you're out walking around outside most of the day and looking for mushrooms, if you're not careful with the ones you've already found.
Yeah, I kind of, through the years that I've been hunting too, kind of narrowed that science down to, you kind of consider it like a veteran, or not a veteran, but say there was a battle wound, and how long is that mushroom you've had? And, plastic is your enemy. So, they sell mesh bags, there's all kinds of, pillowcases. I like a basket. I prefer a basket because, A, you can fall on it, and not crush your mushrooms a lot of the times. And, and I just prefer a basket anymore. And I also, but then I put them in a bag when I'm done. And I've learned that it's like you got a critical couple hours, especially if it's hot out. So if you can, if you can get back and get your mushrooms iced, and basically when I ice them, I've got a new, a theory of if I'm on the road, I freeze half-gallon milk cartons, and I put them in the bottom of a cooler, and I put a layer of cardboard in there, and then I just take a paper sack and put my morels in, like the big paper sacks and set them in my cooler, that cardboard, and they stay beautifully cold, for a long period of time, and then that way they're not in contact with, the ice or in any plastic, and I can basically keep them for 2 or 3 days that way. I don't like to. Usually it's a one-day thing, and but I've learned you kind of really want to get back to the car. You don't want to go, oh, it's killer and I'm picking 100 pounds. Well, you've got to carry that 100 pounds, and when you're uncomfortable, you start beating them up. So, through old age and wisdom, if I found 100 pounds, which I have in a day, it's a 30-pound trip a couple times, 3 times.
Right.
That's how you do it, and you're better off. I also take a backpack. I've got a theory or system, and I won't pick on a rainy days are good, but if it's pouring rain, I really don't like to go out and pick morels in the pouring rain because it's hard on the mushroom. They get soaked, and it kind of washes the flavor out. So, I don't know. I take it very seriously, and maybe that's kind of why I got the term the Mushroom King, because people would say, hey, can you go do it? And I would go do it,
Totally. Well, why don't you tell me a little bit about morelhunters.com?
Morelhunters.com it's a website we just started. It's really there's no advertising or anything. We've tried to shy away from it. We just kind of try to help the local person, all over the United States. We have a sighting map, and it's like, oh, here's morels, and we we have a lot of good folks that like to log in and just say, hey, yeah, I'm down here. We don't really like general say, hey, I'm at Jones State Park and I just found 1,000 pounds because, they're everywhere. Unfortunately, there are people that just, cruise the internet and they would go and hunt that spot. There's, even in the morel business, there really is a lot of, believe it or not, like the fireburns and stuff, there is a lot of illegal aliens and migrants that pick those, and that is they've even started on chanterelles, which are another mushroom, but in Missouri. So we want to help people, but kind of protect their spots too. We don't really care where you're picking them. We're just trying to teach you how to do it a little better, and that's basically what Morel Hunters is all about. There's some recipes there, videos, and it's just a general discussion board that we started because of some of the other ones. There was a lot of bickering, and the guys would get in personal battles about a lot of things, and we just kind of want to talk about morels, and it progresses into the summer months. We'll talk about chanterelles, and there's even arrowhead hunting guys on there and fishermen blogs. I mean, it's just kind of where the hunters gather. It's kind of how I met you guys, I think.
It was actually.
Yeah, which that's all I wanted it to be. I like people. I like other people that like to mushroom hunt, that like to get out in the woods. They care about. When we do morelhunters.com, sometimes we'll do, we do like a foray, where we take people out. That's kind of a fancy term for a mushroom hunt is foray. And, we take people out, and we did it one year, and we charged them, for a seminar and a steak dinner and some morels, and they were all real happy. But everyone from my website that actually came out and helped picked trash up instead of picking mushrooms. We would only point mushrooms out to people, and we literally filled bags full of trash and took them back and hauled them out of the conservation area that we went in. So, it's not all about the mushrooms. We really like to give back, to where we go, and that's why the Mushroom King really came about twofold. Was I want people to get out in the woods. If somebody's not into hunting deer or fishing or something like that, mushroom hunting is another hobby that gets people out into the parks and the state forests, and it keeps the unwanted element out that might be going out there and trashing your place. If somebody's out there doing something with mushroom season, not only morel, but as we have different seasons as long as Mother Nature gives us some rain.
Right. Well, and so if someone wanted to learn how to do this through an expert, I mean, obviously, there's microtours.com, which you're helping with now.
Right. I love the idea. When I first talked to you, and it was about a week afterwards, and you called me back after we just missed each other mushroom hunting, and you said, yeah, I run microtours, and I checked it all out, and I was like, it's very good, and it's nice. I mean, you guys it's reasonable, and I came out and hunted with you, and you're very knowledgeable, and that's what it takes is somebody that's willing to say, hey, we could go out, we may not find them, let's wait a week, and the willingness to just teach somebody something new is in itself a very good gift, so.
Thank you. Well, and I think it's also a really wonderful thing. It's very fun to, like you say, teach someone and let them really enjoy something new, but also show people how to sustainably harvest mushrooms and also help protect the park like you're describing. And so it's really nice that a lot of the people who are into this whole thing really do understand that whole concept. And that, we're lucky to actually have these wonderful places that we can go pick mushrooms in.
Exactly.
So,
and that's another, this whole thing with, by doing some of that, I've got some, private landowners that allow me to go in and mushroom hunt on their property now, and they know that I'm not the guy that's jumping over his fence leaving pop cans or whatever kind of, litter behind. I'm the guy picking that up and chewing somebody off that shouldn't be there. So, it kind of goes twofold. If you play the game right, it does pay off, because people know who you are, and that's I've been fortunate enough with the Mushroom King thing 4 years ago to find a local promotion company that does trade shows and they allow me to go to those trade shows, and I do seminars. Actually, a lot of times I just sit there at the booth. You guys came down to Colorado Springs and helped me out, and and I just teach people, and I say, this is kind of what mushrooms do. If you want to take it further, here's go get this book, go get this website, join your local mycological association, and don't be scared.
Right, because that's the one thing that I think the biggest wall that you and I face a lot in what we do is that people don't understand mushrooms, but they're also kind of afraid of them. And some people, not even kind of. They are definitely afraid of them. And for good reason. I mean, mushrooms are something you need to respect because there are some poisonous mushrooms, and some of them are deadly. But at the same time, it's just like any berry or anything really that's around you. There are poisonous things around you. And if you don't know how to identify them, then you probably shouldn't be picking it up and putting it in your mouth. But, it's one of those things, too, that I think people overthink it, and at a certain point kind of don't realize that it's not as hard as it seems,
No, it's not. And like you said, so basically that's why the Mushroom King came about, was to show people, even like you just said about there's poisonous ones and people are afraid of them for good reason. Well, and they know some people are terribly allergic to mushrooms because, a lot of mushrooms are medicinal, and that's another aspect that I learned, as a secondary thing, too, to mushroom hunting was, we would start chanterelle hunting, and we'd notice that, wow, we felt really good when we were eating chanterelles all the time, and then when we quit, we didn't. Well, we were getting massive doses of beta-carotene and vitamin D, and there was a reason why we felt good. And so that's the other, the other thing that I learned, that I do in the shows is I try to leave everybody with a little, hey, they are good for you. If you study them and you have something wrong with you, there's been age-old cures here for a long time. But that's, the other thing. If you want to learn from, like your mycotours thing, I do several shows, and I'm going to be available for you guys like I promised, in April, which is usually go time here. But I also do some other things, with the libraries and the National Wildlife Association and the Conservation Department.
Tom and Graham, I think when I set this up, I didn't set it up to be archived, and so I think we have a caller. So do you mind taking
wonderful.
this call? Yeah, I know.
We would love to.
Hold on. Okay, here we go.
Hello?
Hi, this is Jackie.
Hi, Jackie. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm great. How's it going, Mushroom King?
Good. How are you?
We're doing pretty good. We've been following you guys for a long time, talking about the Mushroom King. We've done a lot of successful hunts using some of the knowledge he's passed on. Really appreciate that. Got a couple questions as far as selling our finds. Do we have to have a specific license to sell the morels in Illinois?
In Illinois, I am not specifically sure if you do. I can email you that. I mean, if I'll talk to I think Alex Babbage is another big mushroom hunter, and I think he's there. And I know that in Indiana they do, but Illinois, I'm not sure. I know they have a festival there every year, and they sell mushrooms there. Yeah. I can look into it for you. But as far as I know about them, I don't know that they offer certification. The only state that I know for sure does is Iowa. And then I think through Iowa you can also get one in Minnesota and Michigan, I think.
Right. So these certifications
nothing that I know of in Illinois right now.
Right. Yeah, see, we've done all the research we possibly can, and we find nothing with the FDA or anything like that. So we sell them. Sorry?
A lot of it's state food code, and I know that's the good thing. That's what I ran into here in Missouri was, in certain counties it is accepted and nobody cares, and then you get in another county and the health department's like, no, there's a health law in the state and it says you have to have that inspected by a health expert or a mushroom expert.
Correct.
And that's what I was unfortunately faced with here in St. Joe, and the unfortunate thing was that there was a business which is no longer a business, which was a store, and they were allowed to sell it as hog food, and they would actually, sell it on a hamburger thing with plastic wrapped around it, and it was potentially dangerous food product at that point. And the health department let it go on forever, and I went and said, hey, I'm trying to do it right and this and that. And eventually I went and got, the certification so I could do what I wanted to, basically.
Absolutely. See, that's where we would really like to point ourselves into, really try to follow into the footsteps of you and a couple other people that we follow. There's just a great opportunity for these things, especially for the people like us that have the knowledge and the specific locations that really produce just large amounts. And, we're really looking forward to getting out and about this year. So like I said, we just really wanted to, make sure that we could cover our tracks,
What I would suggest is that you go up to, if you're in Illinois, you're close to Iowa, and I know that the University of Iowa will offer a morel identification class in Iowa around the Cedar Rapids area, which is probably closest to you.
Yep.
And I'm not sure when they're doing it. I haven't looked on their website because it's usually like up there at the beginning of March, and I've looked and there hasn't any new dates. And my wife's watching it because she's also going to go get certified, even though, like I said, Missouri, it seems like we were lucky. It took us 7 years to, we talked to the guy for 7 years, and he would say, well, you need to do this, and eventually he was like, oh, well, you went above and beyond what we asked you to do. And, that's kind of how I look at it. You got to
I think that's important, too, that so that the consumers, per se, know that they're coming from a reputable person. You're not going to be getting some trash, and most importantly, they're positively identified.
Exactly,
right.
And that's just back to it. There is, and to me, if I buy from people occasionally, and I want them to pick a certain way. It's like I need you to, cut them close to the caps. Because really people don't want a lot of stem, and stems are good and all, but there's not a lot of taste in them. And to sell them, to restaurants or into a really high quality, I try to leave a little bit of the stem off, but I try to cut every mushroom. I try not to pinch because I don't get dirt on my hands, right. and I try to take them and get them in that cooler as soon as possible. And you don't soak them, and you put them in the paper sacks and you let them breathe. And really by doing that, you make the best quality product there is available. And otherwise, and I've learned the hard way. Unfortunately, there was a lot of trial and error that went into, the way I hunted. I've unfortunately hunted with bags. That was what, as a chef, you would save every bread sack you ever got. And, the first day you went out, you'd start filling them up. Well, by the end of the day, you were losing 30% of your mushrooms, and that's not cost effective. And potentially, making yourself or somebody else sick, to me, is not an option. I really don't. That's not something I want to do, and I know you don't either.
No, we don't, and that's our main purpose is to supply the best product possible, and in our region, we fortunately it's tolerated, like you spoke. County to county, it really suffers severe changes in thought and process and that stuff. But for the most part, we get rid of everyone we find.
Well, and that's good, and and it's a stigma. And it goes even farther than that. I've been ran out of state parks, and I've been ran out of conservation. I've been ran out of places by sheriffs because we were waiting there. To be a mushroom hunter, how it is the crack of dawn. I got to get in that spot. I know it's loaded. I'm going to wait, and you're waiting there. And actually, in Oklahoma, once I had a sheriff pull up and asked us what we were doing, and we're like, oh, we're going to go mushroom hunting. He's like, not in our county, you're not. I'm like, no, sir, you don't understand the morels. He's like, I don't care what they, and
that's right.
Off we went for, a 6-hour jaunt somewhere else, and then came back the next, but.
Right. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay, and that very attitude of that sheriff is exactly why positive identity and the reputation that we gain from being able to do so is really what's driving me and the group that I hunt with to gain these certification classes. And it's so important that the education is out there, and because times are tough. Everybody's doing everything they can,
and that is another point, another issue. I want to get off target. I know Graham and them, I appreciate them taking the call, and we're going to try to keep it to a certain time. But when we're like the state forest, like I talked about, the illegal aliens and immigrants that go in there and pick. That's a huge business, and it's a huge morale business that happens in those fire burns. And it's the national forest. It's the United States Forest Service, and they should be more akin to opening some of that up and controlling it because we went to salmon last year, and it's a depressed community, and there were people literally, like you said, for survival were out, and their kids were dirty, and from the fire, and they were picking every mushroom they could and selling them to make them eat,
Yes,
and,
yes. Well, I too, MTK, I got to get off here. I do appreciate you taking my call.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you.
And really, good luck this year, and I hope you have a very successful time, and we're going to really start listening to this blog radio. We appreciate you taking our call.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think he brings up a really interesting point, a few interesting points there. I mean, and that's the biggest thing is that, I think there's a lot of interest out there to getting certified, and a lot of that, like we were describing, seeing out here, even in Colorado when you were out here, Tom, is just a lot of that. We need to, it's not something that is being focused on enough, and it needs to be kind of controlled in the right way. And so that way you don't have people going in there picking everything and destroying the forest, because it's all about sustainably harvesting this stuff and preserving this wonderful place that we can get these wonderful products from. Exactly. And so luckily some states like Missouri, Colorado's another one that's pioneering in this, that are trying to make it so that you're allowed to do it, because you've got the problem in California where they've decided that you can't pick mushrooms in their parks. And it's people who are confused, and they're not educated enough in what's going on. And it's sad to see something that's that wonderful and that part of our kind of cultural heritage, really, in harvesting and picking mushrooms kind of taken away because people couldn't handle it. They couldn't handle the responsibility. And, it's all about states and places, people, doing that for themselves, but also making sure that we have these programs that, help people get, because people have the interest. There's the people that want to do it, and it needs to be a way that they can do that. So, Tom, why don't you give everyone really quickly just some ways they can get in contact with you?
Well, you can get a hold of me at the Mushroom King at gmail.com if they wanted to shoot me an email. I have a Facebook. I have the Mushroom King on Facebook, and I also, go by Thomas Wiepert, the Mushroom King, which I'm probably going to change. Morel Hunters is another easy way to get a hold of me. I usually try to answer, emails or something on Morel Hunters if I can. A lot of times I'm out, when I'm out in the field, I'll be in a tent 3 months out of the year, and I won't have internet for a while. And luckily, my wife or somebody else will do that for me. But yeah, a lot of times I'll just be up in the morning, out, first guy out, first guy back to bed, get out. It's a sickness.
We'll be with you. We'll be with you.
Exactly. That's a good way to get a hold of me. And for Micro Tours, I think you guys might be putting something up. And, I'll be doing quite a bit of stuff in the last week of April, here. If they want to see, somebody wants to follow me or go to a seminar and see what I'm talking about. I'm going to do the library in April the 4th and the National Wildlife, and it'll all be up on Morel Hunters, so they can always follow that or on my Facebook blog. And I'm trying to put together a few weekends of forays for you and on Myco Tours, and hoping that it's the snow that we're going to get in a blizzard here in a couple of days is going to be good. It'll help the morel thing, because mushrooms I know we talked about, we could have 10,000 shows. So let's do another spot sometime. We'll talk more about it, because snow is going to be a big factor of breaking up nutrients and helping feed those mushrooms. It's like
Well, and there's a bunch of burns we can talk about and tons of cool stuff.
And on the burn thing, I also thought about, I've been in areas where lightning just hits the cottonwood and you have a massive fruiting because, it was a phosphorus charge that went off. It's charged the ground, and I've seen incredible things. You find them in places you'll never think, but if you found them there once, it could occur again. So you always, got to look for the same similarities. And no place is the same. That's the beauty of it. That's what makes it fun,
Yep. Well, and if anyone's interested in scheduling a tour with us, you can just contact me at Graham, Graham, at mycotours, that's mycotours.com. And you can send me an email over there, and we'll try and get you scheduled for this year. So, Jackie, do you have any questions for Tom before we let him go?
And, I can't top what you guys just did, so I'm not even going to pretend. And that was really, really interesting, actually. And I caught most of it. And so, no, that was great. I jotted some notes down, but they're too embarrassing to even ask. And but thank you, Tom. That was awesome. And
for having me on,
a lot of
Jackie.
people.
I appreciate you guys taking the time. Yeah. And you too, Graham, for having me on. Anytime you guys want to talk mushrooms, I'll be more than happy to.
Yeah, it sounds like it. You and Graham are just, like you said, you could go on for hours and hours.
Hours. When people put mushrooms to make cookies out of them and stuff like that, you know that they're crazy. So.
Nice. Very nice. But
awesome.
this was very, very interesting, and I'm certain we will definitely have you on multiple times throughout the year here because that was very interesting.
Well,
so
I look
so
forward to doing that, and I'll keep giving Graham updates because that's like morel hunters. That's what they have that map for, to stay on it. If it happens in 3 weeks, I'm sure Graham's going to want to go. But
oh yeah, I'll be out there.
That's just what we're hoping for.
Yes.
It'd be nice to do a live from the field when Graham's all tired and been sleeping in a tent for 3 weeks and taking notes.
Yeah, perfect. That would be awesome.
You'll have a different aspect on it then. To be happy.
Well, thanks so much, Tom. I really appreciate
all right, you guys
it.
Have a great day. Thanks for letting me come on.
Hey,
thank
you.
Bye.
Right.
Graham, that was so interesting. We have to have him on again.
Yes, I love Tom. Tom is wonderful.
Yeah, that was great.
This is Graham.
And this is Jackie. And we just enjoyed a fermented affair.